and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I am with my favorite bike. The GS1100 GK is not the prettiest bike that I've ever seen, so it's not about the looks. It's not the fastest bike I've ever ridden, so it certainly isn't about the ultimate speed of the bike. It's not the best handling bike. It's not the best really in any one category that I can think of as far as motorcycles go. The way that this bike combines sound and speed and feel, and I am partial to the looks of it. I think it's a handsome machine, if not a beautiful machine. It's very functional in its approach. To me, this bike represents the best of an era. It was a time when Japanese frame technology actually caught up with the engine technology, the carburation, and the brakes. It just makes the bike a very well-balanced machine, meaning the engine, as had in the earlier 70s, the engines dominated the show. They were robust, they were fast, and they quite frankly put out way too much power for the frame and brakes and suspension that were on the bikes. In the late 70s and early 80s, the Japanese, they just got it right. They had a formula where the engine technology, the power output, the frame and suspension technology, and the braking technology were all about even. They had everything on the leader bikes had gone up to dual disc brakes in the front, disc brake in the rear. They went to the constant velocity carburetors and electronic ignition, and so it just made for just some of the best, lowest maintenance, all around street bikes, honestly, to hit the road. And you know, I've owned current stuff, plenty of it, and it just is, these are more engaging to me, and just love this era of bikes. To me, this bike, even in the era of bikes that I love, this one really stands out. It's got a motor that just pulls from 2,000 RPM all the way up to redline. It's never pressuring. As far as, there's not one spot where it just comes on super strong. It's got a very nice linear power band. It just builds and builds and builds, like I say, from 2,000 RPM up. The sound that this thing makes, it's got a Delkevic stainless 4-to-1 exhaust on it, and the sound is just amazing. And every time I ride it, I feel like I'm riding a hot rod. It sounds great under throttle, and when you get off throttle, it has a nice burble off throttle as well. The carburation is just set up so nicely for this, and works with the pipe that's on it. I've updated the electronics on it, or I should say the charging system, and it all around it works. This bike, I've actually put about 8,000 miles on it since I bought it, and have done, it's my most extensive project of the bikes that I've got in the garage, as far as things that I've done to the bike to get it to this point. But it just runs great, sounds great. The little MGO fairing here blocks enough wind that I can ride this bike all day, really in comfort. And I'm not fatigued. Surprisingly, in the corners, this bike is very intuitive, and I ride with a lot of guys that have a lot faster machines than this, and I'm certainly able to keep or set the pace with this machine. Again, it's surprisingly well balanced. Everything works together on it very well. Yeah, it's got a large fuel tank on it, which again, it could be styled a little bit sleeker, but the functionality of being able to go almost 200 miles on a tank of gas is wonderful, especially on a bike that's comfortable enough to let you do that easily. And this thing is, though it was designed in the 80s and really meant for was when highway speeds were limited to 55 miles an hour, it will do highway speeds in the 70 plus mile an hour range all day long if you want to. It's a little bit buzzy up at those speeds, but it is capable of handling that. Like all the bikes of the era, it would be nice. It just feels like this is, and especially since the motor pulls so hard down low, it would be nice if it had a 6th gear. If I could change anything on the bike, I would put a 6th gear on it and call it done. But it's not, the 5-speed is fine, and honestly 5th gear is good for anything from 40 miles an hour on up, and just runs fantastic. So in this video, what I'm going to do is go over some of the history of the bike, the modifications that I've done. I've got found some older pictures of what the bike looked like on the day that I bought it, and I actually ran it for the first year as a touring bike, and have just I didn't really, at the time, I didn't want to invest money into making it right, but just wanted something to ride, and I bought it in the fall, so it made sense to leave the full fairing on. Honestly, the full fairing has great coverage and very, very nice to ride in colder weather, but it was so warm that on a 50-degree day, wearing shorts, it was still on the warm side behind that fairing. So taking that off just allowed me to enjoy it in the nicer weather. And this fairing that I have on now, I think for me is a perfect blend. It's really good wind coverage for everything up to about 40 degrees. Beyond that, you don't want to really be riding on a bike that doesn't have a full fairing and heated hand grips. If you actually use your bike as transportation, having some sort of storage is super handy. So I'll just go ahead. I've got the matching top box for this bike. It's also nice because it incorporates a pillion pad, and so if I have a passenger riding with me, they can enjoy the security of having a backrest. So I'll just pop that on here real quick. So, like I say, not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's as functional as a GV unit, and came with a bike, so it's a win-win. So let's go over the project history of the bike, complete with photos, and we'll just take a look at the process along the way. All right, I hope you enjoy.
This is how the Suzuki looked on day one of the project, and other than changing the fluids in the bike and making sure it was safe to ride, I didn't really do anything else to it at this time. I just rode it and enjoyed it for about 6 months over the winter, and then in the springtime on my way to work one day, I noticed an electrical fire smell, and the bike got me to and from work, but when I got back to the house and took off the gas tank, I was greeted by some burned electrical connectors, and the regulator rectifier had failed, and too much voltage through these, so it really fried them. And then I used that as an excuse to really kick off round one here. And I replaced the regulator rectifier and the stator with Rix units. I repaired the wiring harness. I added the Superbike handlebar by IMGO, also the headlight and Viper fairing. I replaced the suspension units with progressive units, and changed the brake lines, cleaned the carbs, retorqued the head bolts, checked the valves, put new mirrors and signals on it. I also put the APE cam chain tensioner and did some pinstriping. So that completed round one. I rode it for a while like that, but I still had a piece of metal broken off in the exhaust that rattled and sounded terrible. So round two was a pretty easy one. I just replaced the stock exhaust with a Delkevic exhaust, and then went one size up on my main jets and one size up on my pilots. And I ran that in that configuration for about 2 years. Round 3 is a more recent round, and I put the taller IMGO shocks on it. I widened the handlebar with the Magna wide handlebar from IMGO. I replaced the clutch and shortened up the upper brake line. I put the chrome luggage rack on so I could mount the top box, and I replaced the tires. So it is finished for now, and I just want to get out and ride it. Just enjoy riding this bike, and so here we go.